So I'm just going to launch here. Years ago, I had a patient that I'll call Jim, who I was treating for major depression. Jim came in one Monday and told me that he'd drunk to blackout the previous Saturday night, and that he vaguely remembered his wife coming in the bedroom and removing the revolver from his mouth. In the course of that session, I asked Jim if he'd be willing to visit some 12-step or other recovery communities, in addition to the work that we were doing with depression. Jim got enraged with me. He told me that a few years earlier, he'd been court-ordered to Alcoholics Anonymous after picking up a DUI. "I've never seen such a bunch of losers," Jim shouted at me. "I went to those effing meetings as long as they made me, but I'm sure as hell not going to go back." So I'm wondering, Stephen, I think many of us run into such moments with our patients when we're treating maybe a couple of things: depression, chemical dependency, etc. And it seems to me it might be a little cameo of what we would call a position of terminal uniqueness. And I'd love to hear anything you'd want to share with us about such moments or about this concept.
Absolutely. Well, first, the patient, which we've disguised to the identifying information, but basically, and I, totally feel comfortable at this in my work, is I was that guy, basically with that, not a wife, but with a girlfriend, and minus the revolver. I didn't have a firearm, but I was the guy blackout drunk, my girlfriend finding me, and just in that state of watching the show Intervention. Actually, I look back on, I was in the nice apartment in Baltimore, and I would watch the show Intervention, which is a comic thing of doing interventions professionally. And I'd watch that show and I'd just judge harshly the people running out of trailers and go, look at these effing losers that have horrible, like, it was kind of, just comparing myself to something that's worse and someone further down the road, or someone, the classic is, I don't live under a bridge and I have my girlfriend and I'm in college, so I don't have a problem. Leave me alone. And I just remember that mindset when you were sharing the presentation, waking up from a blackout, but then judging someone that is in a more of a dire situation, because I'm not in the hospital right now. I'm not in jail right now. I have this, so therefore I'm fine. And I also felt that, like you're talking about, the terminal uniqueness, and I see that over and over again with the mindset. And there's some classic things to look for when working with addiction is minimization, rationalization, excuse making, justification, and the problem's over there. And I totally get, and what's exciting about where the recovery field's going, and the Surgeon General put out a report about many paths to recovery. And I'm a huge believer of that. But the one thing I've seen over and over again, there's maybe been a few exceptions in my career, that for the majority, they need some support on some level, a community. And we've talked about that, and what we call mutual support aid. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a 12-step, or, there's the other side of a cognitive behavioral smart recovery. And it's kind of like bars. Not everybody goes to the fancy cocktail bar. Some people like to dive bar. Someone like sports bar. But if you don't show up and go out and look, you'll never find, and you'll just be in that horrible isolation and lack of connection that keeps people either going back to their destructive patterns of substance use or other addictions. But it's also like, when I first got into my own recovery, I learned it wasn't about stopping what I was doing. It was learning how to stay stopped. It was learning how to live without doing that, and doing that over time. And so what I say to people, and I'm very honest, and that's kind of like, I'm excited about this conversation we're having about what I needed. And I think what I've seen a lot of breakthroughs is to have someone have the courage and confidence and to be directly honest with me and put it all on the line. That's when I realized I wasn't just being the whole for like, tell me how you feel about it, Stephen, that kind of posture, I would have just been sitting in a therapist's office, for years, just going, I feel shitty, and then I would go and drink. And what I needed was someone to really cut through and say, your life is going in a really bad direction. These are the facts on the ground.
Mm.
It's not normal to wake up in your own vomit and have your girlfriend find you blacked out. Like, that's not within the criteria of healthy behavior. And I need someone to be directly honest with that and kind of cut through my crap, because I was buying into my own stories. And my true friends that I found, not only in the recovery journey, but just in general, are the ones that had the courage to just call me out and tell me the truth as they saw it. And I found, and some would say that's a therapeutic error by, kind of giving that direct feedback. But what I found with working in my practice and in intervention, if I shy away from being that kind of honesty, a lot of people don't end up recovering. And it has to be done. And there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Stephen, and thanks so much for sharing some of your journey along this way. I found that the people who seem to shed the greatest light are people who are in recovery themselves, and they're people I most like to hang out with because they're the most real, the most fun, the most honest, and I'm already enjoying hanging out with you. I wonder, before we move into what therapists can or can't do, family members can or can't do, what they might be advised to do when they see someone lying to themselves about their situation, could we just explore that phenomena a bit more? What leads us to blow smoke instead of really taking ourselves in as we are? What is this thing we call terminal uniqueness?
I think there's a lot of things under the hood there that gets you to kind of see that coming from point A to point B, from I don't have a problem or the problem's elsewhere. And I get that. Like, I would believe that my girlfriend was the problem. I thought Baltimore, the city of Baltimore, was my problem, my parents. And it wasn't until people had the courage, like I said, to just kind of keep coming back to the facts of, waking up in your own vomit, getting a DUI, which I hadn't had that happen, but I had other consequences, and people kind of really just not shying away from that, that reality of the consequences and having the courage to hold me accountable. That's where the shift happened. And what I see in intervention is the kid gloves in a lot of ways of the just being nice, and as Dr. Burns would call excessive niceness. I've never seen that work one time with helping someone get into treatment or get into recovery. A lot of times it's through consequence and discomfort and having that mirror of seeing the truth of what you've become. And what intervention got born out of was this idea of waiting for rock bottom and for someone to like see the light and have that moment before changing. A lot of times it would end, and they say in recovery circles, and I've seen this in my career, is jails, institutions, and death. And at severe, people die without, and I've been in detox wards trying to have a conversation. People are like, I ain't got a problem, this is a mistake. And they're in the hospital bed, saying it was just a big mistake, while they're on Ativan, detoxing from a huge dose of alcohol. And they say, oh, it's bad luck. And it's not until someone, is able to really come in to that darkness and be brutally honest that, if you keep doing this, the likelihood of you living is very low. And it's not a time to talk about the person's feelings and their initial frustration. It's time to talk about, like, there are some big choices you need to make if you really want to get over this, this trap you're in.
I see. So the terminal uniqueness then would be, while others might pick up DUIs or have guns in their mouth or wake up in their vomit, I'm not like them. I'm different. And the terminal part would be, if we go down that road far enough, we will end. Our life will end physically, financially, relationally, emotionally. Is that how you would understand that term?
Well, it's basically, yeah, in a way it's and it sometimes it could be like what they say, a slow boil. It could be 20 years of just really a slow deterioration physically, mentally, and just like really suffering over time. And other times it could be a shocking accident or an overdose or something like that. But until someone's really honest in a way that that's whether you choose, and really it seems kind of, when you finally get in this place, it seems almost like that helping addiction of I need to help you. If you have any of that, you won't be successful. Where you're able to really give it back to the person and say, if you want to destroy your life, you're welcome to do that, and I want to learn from your experiment. But at any moment that you want to change, I can show you a way out of that. But it sounds like you're convinced that partying is the answer. And it's not until like you really let go and challenge the person and even encourage them to kind of, instead of, they want to kind of deflect responsibility. And if you keep coming back to saying, okay, you're right, you're not on fentanyl or some severe, you're not in the cartels or some crazy, you're not a serial killer. Okay, great, you're not that bad, you're not in, locked up in a penitentiary somewhere. But what's going on over here on this side? Is that like normal that you're blacked out drunk regularly? Is that, just kind of really highlighting in over and over? And if you do it in a patronizing way, then that I would say is an error. If you're doing it in a very loving and respectful but firm way, that's where I see breakthroughs happen over and over again.
So an error then that a therapist could make when someone's involved with terminal uniqueness as an explanation for their behavior or a rationalization of it or something would be to be overly nice and like buy into that position and say, well, we won't look at the fact pattern, we'll just talk about your feelings or something like that. And you're saying that might actually be an error to go in that direction with someone who's engaged with those kinds of behaviors.
Yes, it's an ability, a combination of finding truth in what the person's saying. That you're right, you're not under a bridge, and I've worked with those clients that are homeless. But let's experiment. You think you're so different, you're not going to end up like these people. You're going to be on a different path, and like let's explore the evidence of where this is heading. Are you willing to take that risk? It sounds like you are. That's cool. And really just kind of owning that, what they're saying has some validity to it in a way, the excuses, but it's not until someone really takes a stand to say, and this isn't healthy. Like, I'm sorry, like, would you like to talk to the Surgeon General who wrote a report on substance use disorders and tell him to change the criteria about blackout drinking and binge drinking, as that's like a healthy path to becoming, where your values are. So it's really kind of, in a way, calling bullshit on like the discrepancy between what they're saying and their behaviors and what everyone else is saying. And a lot of times in an intervention, it's like loved ones are, I can't live this way anymore because my son, daughter, wife, husband, employee, whatever, has been, doing this, like creating a tornado of havoc, convinced that there's no wind blowing at all. It's just kind of like they're just hanging out. And it's not until a person is willing to really have a firm line of, I'm done, being around this tornado. And if you want to take the show on the road, then you can do that, but we're not going to do that anymore. And that's where I see, I could see in a therapist context, and I do see this, and this is, again, every situation is different. Some people need some, you have to have that skill to discern how to approach things. But what I'm saying is I've seen people struggling with addiction go to like harm reduction therapists for moderation protocols, or go to a therapist and vent every week, and then they're drunk between the sessions the whole time and never change anything. And I've seen this happen over and over again, that if someone wants to manipulate a therapist, they can do that. And then a lot of that's something just to be aware of. And the whole terminal uniqueness concept is, and I think it lies in specificity. Is someone's like, oh, I'm not like that homeless guy out there, and say, well, and then you go, oh, hey, you ever talked to him and learned about his life story? Well, no.
Hmm. Hmm.
And for me, where I feel like a place of gratitude is some of the people that helped me the most in where I felt a deep connection and changed my life had been homeless and
Hmm.
had more severe consequences. And they had the courage to go, Stephen, and they called me a closet drunk. They were not like a clinical, you have a substance use disorder. They're like, you're a closet drunk. Like that's what you're doing. And they just would come straight down the middle. And one could say that that's a put down, or you know, and what I look back on it, it was like the concept of tough love in a way, and not an abusive, like where they were trying to be a bully, but they just loved me to just tell me the truth,
Hmm. Yeah.
to be like,
So basically, they called your bullshit, and you
hard.
found that helpful. I
Mhm.
wonder, could you share a story from the other side where you called someone else out, and what happened as a result of your doing that?
Yeah, that's basically what my job is I was thinking the other day, is my job is to call people on their shit, and in a loving way and in a clinical way. There's a lot of things around it. It's not just being cavalier and just, coming in with a hammer. There's a lot for doing an intervention. You got to do preparation and you have to be strategic. But there is a time and place where it's really important to be direct. And people, I think, really appreciate that, even though it might be hard to hear. At least I do afterwards. So I'll give you a couple examples. I had a referral come to me with someone that loves smoking weed, and that's very prevalent. And that we could go into just talking about cannabis. And I had helping someone get medical marijuana for late stage cancer to cope with that. So that's like a medicine side. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I see people with psychotic breaks because they're abusing cannabis and like their life is going. So there's a whole shift around that. So when someone comes and go, I'm taking my medicine, and there's a lot of ways to kind of manipulate with, I don't have a problem because I'm taking my medicine,
Yeah.
within, if we're just talking about cannabis. And the same, we could give one, just a quick one with alcohol. Well, it's legal. I'm 21. It's fine. Like, is this illegal? I was on spring break. It's all good. So there's a lot of kind of things that as you go forward to kind of learn how people delude themselves from the consequences of their actions and their behaviors. But a few specific case examples is I had someone who loved smoking weed, and that was my first love. That's what I got into. I fell in love with marijuana when I was 15, and I really pursued that. And so I get it, that kind of drive to get high, and I was admiring the people that were doing that and that culture. So I was working with this guy, and I could just hear his excuse making go, "Oh, my mom, she's a she's a real nag." And I say, "Well, how much money are you spending on this? And whose money are you spending?" And some of these direct questions, and it would kind of stump him up. And then he would go into a defensive posture of, well, everyone's doing it. It's like what goes on at college. And, we're just having this. And this goes on I worked with him for about 6 months on this kind of weekly basis, kind of talking about his use. And, he initially shied away to want to focus on other things and get that addressed because he was having other stuff, but he didn't want to talk about it at all. So it took some time. But fast forward, I finally started noticing, like, I'm getting kind of sick of this conversation. It's really getting old just to be like him justifying getting high and it's no problem. Meanwhile, all these issues are coming up, he'll be complaining, going, I'm not motivated. I don't know. I'm falling in for my work is hard. And I was like, well, but it's not because of weed, because that's just normal. And you just get to a point where you're like, all right, if I keep having the conversation on this level, um, this is going to be the same probably in another 6 months. And his family were financing the treatment to work and do the coaching and all of that. And that was another issue where there was not really accountability that he had skin in the game to change anything. And I was like, okay, it's great to have that, to have the additional income, pay the bills. And this is not a good setup to, like, I don't feel good with this. So I got to that point and I realized it's time to just come straight out and do what I call, there's the California Stephen and there's the New York Stephen. And this has been the fun. And I really love California, and I'm very into mindfulness and a lot of the very empathic, and that's really wonderful. But I do love traveling to the East Coast, where I remember being, before getting on a plane, and this lady behind me, she's like, "Are you going to move and get on that train? I got places to go." And I was like, whoa. But it was not out of, that was just the being in New York. They're like, get on the
Mhm.
train or don't. I don't have time to talk about your feelings. Um, so I said to him, I said, do you want the California version or you want the New York? He's like, I want the New York. I want it. And he gave that permission. And I said, hey man, every week you're complaining about these problems. You keep smoking, and I know you love it, but I can't take this money from your family anymore. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell your mother or your father that you don't want to change this habit that they're upset about, and that causing consequences in your relationship with them. And you just tell them that you just want to keep smoking weed all the time while they pay for your college education. And you just tell them, and we don't need to, there's nothing else to work on. I can't help you anymore. And I'm actually kind of losing patience with it. And I didn't say it like in a rejecting way. I'm losing patience. We're not thinking, and you're just going to have to do that. But I'll be here if you change your mind. But I can't, this is as far as the buck stops here.
Hmm.
And that was the week that he got completely sober. He calls me, he ends up joining a recovery support system. He is now 100% abstinent. He
Hmm.
all has completely changed his life. His relationship with his family's improved. His education, he finished, college, and now is in grad school abroad.
Hmm.
He has not smoked, and I still use some of those techniques of trying to tempt the person, like, well, you want to go get high now? And they, you know, always, a lot of times once they've made that breakthrough, they don't want to go back.
Hmm.
But he says to me, if you wouldn't have given me that New York Steven and said, hey, like, I'm not doing this game that we're playing anymore. I'm not interested. And if you want to change your life, give me a call. That's what shifted everything.
Hmm.
And I would say the same in my experience. And I've seen it time and time and time again, for people to enter recovery. It's not until someone really says, I am done doing this game we're doing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's when people finally surrender to changing and doing a different process a lot of times.
So much in what you're sharing there, Stephen, in terms of the therapeutic alliance and the person's experience of themselves and the stories they're telling themselves, and then including you in. Here's what's going on. Here's what's important for us to talk about. Here's what isn't important for us to talk about. So for you to step into that stream and bring in a new element, the New York Stephen, saying, we've been doing this, and we could keep doing it, but I don't want to. I'm not going to do that. Would provide a platform then for the person to make a decision that sounded like this person wanted to make. He was ready to embrace a different kind of life, but he needed you to make that move, for himself to make that move. And I'm assuming that in working with family systems, you have those moments as well. I'm wondering if there's a story you'd have for us about helping a family system shift, and then what happens as a result with the person who's the addict.
You're talking about the intervention before the intervention. So normally there's all kinds of things. It's what's great about doing this work. There's a lot of complexity within a family. And normally a call comes in, it's a concerned other concerned about someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to pay me to fix the problem, like a mechanic. And I will, that would be great if it worked that way. And if I take that, which some people do, and I don't know how they sleep at night, but I don't work that way, is like, if you want to fix this, you're going to have to show up. And a lot of times people are gone in the wind after just that.
Mm-hmm.
So the name of the game in a lot of ways is accountability. Is, yes, you can throw some money at a problem for treatment, but if you don't show up to participate, it's not going to stick. It'll get you kind of stabilized, but if you don't show up and participate, and so if I'm working with a family, I hold them accountable to their own process of recovery, and everyone needs to be involved. And that's like the first part of the whole, just getting into the work. And a lot of people can't make it over that hurdle. And then once the people that do, and they're like, okay, then there's a process of really figuring out the right communication and setting healthy boundaries and limits, like what we're talking about is, and in the really kind of a layman's terms, is just not buying into your loved one's crap anymore. Like, you're calling me because you're in pain and you're worried and you're tired of it, but the real thing is you haven't done anything about it. That's why people, and at its the largest thing for people to understand, intervention, you strip away, like, I don't really have a lot of respect for the TV show and all the drama around it, and it can be intense. However, at its simplest form, it's helping a family and a system, whether it's friends, family, through a conflict, right? And a lot of times the individual who's struggling is in conflict. A part of them wants to get wasted and party, and a part of them doesn't want to feel suicidal and have a revolver and have their girlfriend nag at them. Like, there's a conflict. And then there's a conflict around the loved ones. A part of them wants the problem to go away, and then they also are too afraid to do what's necessary to make the problem go away. So they're in conflict. So my job is to basically come in and, pop that out so that they can then resolve that conflict, the elephant in the room, which is a very difficult conversation, and then give them the solutions to change their life if they accept that. And so what I've learned is that every person calling me, I used to think, oh, well, the first person calling, they're all together. Like, they got it. There's nothing here. It's the problem. And if you buy in, the problem's the partner, or you're in for a rude awakening. And, a friend of mine who's I really respect, who's on the East Coast, he says, I will not allow a family or an individual to run the show with their emotions. If I do that, allow the anxiety or other things that come up to run the show, I'm going to get eaten alive. And what I've realized is, if people stick to the process that can be difficult, change happens, whether the person accepts help from the treatment or not. And maybe it's through experience, I've been in situations where the choice is to go to a homeless shelter or go to treatment. And that is a really intense moment for someone to be in it. Or the choice is, I'm filing for divorce, or you're going to get help. And I'm done living this way. And until you are in that moment over and over again, it's really hard to go the distance to break the conflict through. So there's a lot of things to work with. And the biggest thing that I say to families, and I say to individuals, well, the first for intervention is, it's not family therapy. That's for when you're in recovery. Like, when someone calls me for intervention, they're basically not even in treatment yet. It's called pre-treatment, to get set up to get into the help. And a lot of people want to work on all this other stuff. And I say, no, it's not time yet. You have to do this first before you are able to do the family therapy. And I'm not providing that service. So it's a boundary there. But I say to people, because the stress levels can come up, is this is a process. You didn't get here overnight, and the process of change happens over time. But if you take this will open the door to a new life. And I say that with the individuals too. Like, back to your case presentation, is someone has looking at the facts, and that's the thing, rather than what the person's saying, is loaded revolver, blackouts, girlfriend stressed out, complaining about everybody being losers. That's the resume of just facts. And then a person over here saying, I don't have a problem. If I kind of spend my time focusing on that, then I'm missing what's actually happening. And I would say, that's a serious situation that needs someone to tell the truth, that your life is on the line. You literally have a firearm where, this is not should I go to Starbucks or should I go to Pete's Coffee? This is a big crossroads you're at.
So, what you're saying from the family system side of things is that the identifying the person who's smoking or who's drinking as the problem would be a dead end. That for you, you'd be talking with all parties about what's happening in the home, say, and that would actually set the stage for one or more individuals making some changes. And I'm wondering if you could tell us about a family you've worked with where one or more individuals made changes and what the effect of those changes were on the addict's choice.
I have many examples of it, so I'll give you two. One was where, and I have so much respect for a lot of the modalities that I've been training in therapy, and I have respect for so many clinicians. But sometimes the outpatient setup. So here's an example of someone being in private practice, or someone seeing a great talented therapist and a psychiatrist once a week, but they're getting wasted every hour between those times, and then they're a mess at home. Even like a high level concierge practice where you have all of these people helping a person, it's still not helping the person get to the other side of the shore. And when I see that going on, and I had a case like that, I go, this person needs residential care to stabilize, and they need a unified front that's on the same page, where they can't go to the psychiatrist and say one thing, the therapist say another thing, go to the family thing, say another, and just kind of keep that going on for years. And so I came into the intervention, and I, with and humility too, I wasn't like, you could come into my private practice, it's not going to work. I'm not that great. Like, I can provide this, but if it's on like a once a week basis, what is this person going to do to get to the all those other hours in the day? They need more care. And working with the parents, getting them in a united front, and then really having that difficult conversation to say, this isn't working, and having the doctor in the room and the therapist in the room and go, this setup is flawed. And the problem is not that the person or the clinicians are not able to deliver us good service. The problem is the setup. And so once that conversation was had, then the person could get to the right residential place for what they needed, completely stabilize and focus. And then the family was brought in to do the family program and be part of the family program in parallel as this was, sequentially moving forward. So that then that family, and I just got a call about it, is this person who struggled for years with all of, and felt more and more hopeless because you get all these professionals, you're still not getting better. He now is in his second year of recovery. He's got a full-time job. His parents are able to go back to their work and really sleep a good night's sleep. And then the family healing is happening because they are continuing on that process. And that was really exciting.
So in that case, Stephen, was the bullshit getting called this structure that allegedly was addressing the problem but actually wasn't. And your mission was to say, look, folks, let's look at the fact pattern here. All of these things are taking place, and this person's continuing to use and perhaps even deteriorate.
Same. Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that over and over again in many different cases. And it doesn't, a lot of times it's just like finding the right match for what the person needs. And I'm a big believer, like, I am a huge fan of cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness practice, 12-step. There's so many things to offer. And I can only do so much. I bet a lot of listeners, like, we've been talking for, like, I'd be like, 20 minutes is good enough. 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour and a half. Wow. And then this idea of like 6 hours of training on CBT, I'd just be like, I need to get outside. And I think what's great about some of the programs that I work with, they have a holistic, like, of living in the day. Like, you're doing fitness, you're learning how to take care of your basic needs in other areas, you're interacting with a community, and you're working with a great therapist. But that combination of getting out and doing different things and not just sitting in an office all the time, which is appropriate at some point, but having that experience where you can be around a community and doing that and have like a, a more balanced way of getting the treatment is,
Mhm.
I've seen to be really effective instead
I've
of,
seen that too, and I've seen it delivered with a lot of success by peers. So a couple of friends of mine came here to New Mexico about 10 years ago and started opening Oxford houses for men and for women. And I had a patient that I was treating up here in Taos for, uh, it was a heroin addiction. And there were other providers in the picture, methadone people, et cetera. And I didn't see much shift for him. He was living at home, and the family was somewhat enabling him to continue to not live his life, but to use these substances. What finally happened was he ended up at an Oxford house. And the last I'd heard, he'd actually become like the director of the Oxford House, which is a pure recovery community where people just live together, and you have to work. You can't, sit and watch TV reruns or something, because that's not recovery. That's just waiting for relapse. So even if you're receiving disability or something, you need to go out in the community and volunteer, and then come in and you have responsibilities. And the outcome data for this approach is really impressive, as is the outcome data for AA. And I think that these programs speak to what you're describing, that having a whole life to support you in creating a new life gives you something that sitting one-to-one with a therapist for however many hours a week just can't give you.
can't. And what I say, and I feel like this is absolutely right, is if I'm getting drunk all the time or using drugs, which provides intense euphoric feelings and a lot of, pleasure. And I, even after what's 14 years, I miss that. I love that feeling,
Mm.
but I just don't want the hangover. Like I want that kind of just be in that like space, but I don't want to have all the consequences. I don't want to have like lose respect for my family. I don't want to have relationships be separate. I don't want to be able to not be functioning and all these chaotic things, and then it escalates. They say it gets worse, not better, if you keep pursuing that. And many do pursue it to the gates of insanity and death. And I've seen that. It's like, wow, this isn't a game, but that elusive feeling of like, oh, the relaxation of alcohol, or what it does is very powerful. And so I understand that. And if you don't give somebody a sufficient substitute, you're going to take away this thing that is probably the one thing providing relief to their stress or other things. And then you're going to say, and I'm giving you nothing but just sit in your room and good luck to you. That is all, I think, cruel. And I think I wouldn't want to stop if I didn't have a sufficient substitute to replace what I was doing. I wouldn't even be talking to you about this right now. And I now have had, and it's not been, and the other thing, I'm honest, it's like recovery's hard. It's not necessarily like you just sit and have one like conversation and it's just like you're good to go. But there's so many things available now that you can, for the people that really want to change, like there are things to replace that one elusive feeling. And I'm just a huge believer, if you don't give somebody a sufficient substitute, they're going to go back to what gives them that pleasure. So if conflicts aren't resolved within a family, which is high stress, if you don't learn how to, have that self-care, that buzzword term, but learning how to regulate your nervous system, you don't have things to look forward to. You don't have like, all these other things that are available for feeling better. It makes sense. Like I would go back and be in a bar, just, black out
Yeah.
every day.
I've noticed, Stephen, that recovering addicts and people who are recovering or have recovered from PTSD are my favorite people. And I think it's because they're the people who feel life most deeply. And I've noticed again and again in the trauma work I do, it's the people who are most empathic that get PTSD. People who are more self-referenced, kind of closed off, they can see some real bad stuff happen, and their position is, well, it wasn't me, but someone else who sees that and isn't separate from it, but feels that suffering within themselves, years, decades later, can continue to suffer deeply as a result of being exposed to, say, a war or a sexual assault, something like
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
So it seems to me that in particular, these populations are people who need that authentic life to backfill the drug use. That someone else who's more numb or less sensitive might just be able to watch some TV and get on down the road. But these folks seem to require, in a deep way, an authentic life, a life of authentic relationship to themselves and other people, to maintain sobriety,
Hmm.
but also to live deeply, joyfully, peacefully, in contentment. And in that way, it seems to me that AA is offering what might be this country's unique contribution to world spirituality. Buddhism comes from the East and Islam from the Middle East, etc. But I think that the 12 steps are probably this country's gift to people who want to go a spiritual way and deepen their experience of the reality of the way things are. And I wonder if before we stop today, you'd speak a bit to this other aspect, the spiritual dimension of recovery, we could say.
Yeah, I love that topic. I want to say just a couple of things on. I don't speak for an organization as a whole, but just of how much respect I do have for. And there's other, like there's refuge recovery, which is a Buddhist and
Mhm.
mindfulness, and there's smart recovery, and there's groups for women, and there's diverse groups for LGBTQ, and there's it's an amazing men's groups, women's groups.
Mhm.
Um, and what's amazing about 12-step programs, and especially AA, and how it began in the Great Depression, and we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and it's like really a rough time globally. But AA was born in like one of the worst times, like Great Depression. People were jumping off of skyscrapers in Manhattan, and the stockbroker Bill Wilson, instead of jumping to his death because the stock market was crashing, he was on Wall Street. He is drinking himself to death. He realized that he needed to find someone else to help, and he had this spiritual experience, and that's when he went and traveled to Ohio to this doctor, the Dr. Bob, who was a physician whose wife was complaining, and he was the big ego doctor, and he didn't have a problem because he was an MD, but he was dying of alcoholism. And it wasn't until Bill met him and had this conversation of really heart to heart, just deep, like, sharing his experience, strength, and hope, that woke him up. And that's where the whole thing was born. And they kept it really simple: is one person struggling talking to another, sharing their experience, strength, and hope in a general way. Boom. And it's just like that deep level of empathy and laughter and connection. And it grew from there. And the diversity that came out, women, men, race, creed, all of this, it's just a melting pot of backgrounds. And they say, whether you're from Yale or from jail, you're welcome here. And to be honest, I think like some of the people from Yale have a harder time getting it because and what I wanted to give a couple like things with the spirituality, and coming full circle to the loser comment. And I feel like, because it's very public, there are people in the public eye that are open about their recovery: Elton John, Michael Phelps, Eminem, Robert Downey Jr. There are people that are very proud about, and I go, would you go up to these people and say, hey, you're a total loser, next time you go to the Grammys, say that Elton John, who was hosting this big benefit for like. And there are so many people that I really admire, and that's on the celebrity level. Okay, great. And people can admire that. But within just, let's just talk about the general population. One of my heroes is a man who fought in the Vietnam War, who was homeless on the streets of Baltimore, who literally saved his own life, like was on the brink of dying from alcoholism, had a blood alcohol of zero point 0.4, got himself on his own to recovery meetings, no professional treatment, and became very spiritual, had gratitude for having a bus pass and food in his apartment. And but what was amazing is he put himself through college at the age of 50. And that was one of the most inspiring things. You could get all these people with fortunes and all that, but this guy that had gone from there to get himself through college and then go in to the recovery process and continue to stay with that, that's a hero in my mind, and not a loser by any stretch of the imagination. But to get into the topic of the spirituality aspect, is I think that is what a lot of, like, they say for the idea of getting high and partying, is we're looking for some type of spirit, like experience, a euphoric spiritual, they're searching for that. And the 12 steps is a vehicle over time to get to that place by, doing hard work. And the thing where alcohol or drugs are really attractive is you don't have to do anything. You just go, it's really easy. Just like go down the bar and just sit there and put it in. The problem is it's not sustainable. It doesn't last. You have to keep refilling. Whereas the 12-step process actually builds, and to do what is the therapeutic principles behind that, you start getting lighter and lighter by cleaning up your past, going through the process, and then going to help other people. And I've done a lot of research on the principles behind the therapeutic principles behind it. And it's not all about just having a come to Jesus moment and then just chanting, in a monastery somewhere and just sitting like a Buddhist monk or something like that. It's really about facing yourself, cleaning up the wreckage of your past, and then learning how to live in a way where you have peace and contentment. And there's something that it opens the door. There's been a saying that 12-step is spiritual kindergarten. And that's really, it's a very humble kind of approach, but it opens the door to a lot of different directions you can take. And I think the whole concept of storytelling, which especially in the US, we miss that authentic storytelling of learning from other people's experiences, listening to that. And, that's been a healing, just to hear other people's true, their experiences.
I love that notion, Stephen, authentic storytelling. I've done a lot of Zen practice. And one way of understanding that is calling myself on my bullshit. So, I tell myself all this stuff about who I am and who other people are and the way the world is. And 98% of it is bullshit. It's just a lot of kind of self-reference thinking or, paranoid thinking or something. So when we do Zen meditation, we sit down and we stop doing that. We say, no, that's bullshit. Now what's before the bullshit? And out of that practice, I think, emerge the authentic stories. And I love reading the Buddhist literature. My friends and teachers contribute to that. It's not just the Upanishads 2,500 years ago. It's being written today. But it's the authentic story of when we stop blowing smoke up ourselves and look at, no, what's happening here before I do that? Authentic narratives then emerge. And those authentic narratives are encouraging to others who are on the path. And I understand that within the 12-step communities, those stories that a person who's stuck with the terminal uniqueness would say are pathetic, those are pathetic stories, are actually the salvation stories. And if the person would be open to hearing them, it could save them as well.
Right. And there's a thing where people, and what I love about it is it's this kind of humility of, maybe this isn't for you. Okay. It's not a cult. You could leave there at any time. And then what's the most powerful is people that have and they call it in 12-step circles, more research. I got to go back to drinking to do a little more research. And it even says in the basic text of the program is go out and try some controlled substance use and go do that. And I love that they wrote that in there. So go and do that. It's risky, but our hat will be off to you if you're able to be successful. We tried that hella times. Like we tried to that's why we're here. We tried everything to, drink in a way that wasn't destructive, and realized that it wasn't like an accident. That I didn't decide like I didn't decide on like a Friday night, should I go to a movie? I'm gonna go to a meeting of AA. Like no one thinks that. It's just like no one ends up like putting that on their bucket list necessarily. But what I love is just, okay, and this is kind of maps onto my work, is someone, if they aren't convinced themselves, I don't feel like it's my job to convince somebody. I think life will do that. And it's heartbreaking is when it's done through tragedy. That's the hardest part is I don't want that to happen. So I'm very honest about those conversations, but the principle of maybe you're not meant to be in this thing, and go do some more exploring and research.
Yeah.
And some of the most powerful stories have been from people coming back and talking about their failed attempts and being like, yeah, I went to Vegas and thought it was going to be different, and here's what happened. And you just kind of get this amazing like gift that, it wasn't because it was in, I thought it was in Mexico. If I just went to Mexico, it would be different. But it turns out what was happening in the US was the same as Mexico. And you just get to hear, and one wise person said, you can learn from people. And this is just in general, it's not just applicable in a recovery atmosphere. You can learn from people what to do and what not to do by learning from what people's experiences are. But if you think you're terminally unique, and this is to wrap it, to come full circle, if you think you are an exception to the rule and your mind is so closed off from learning, I think the only way to open that mind is through discomfort and pain and consequences. Because if I believe that I'm so different than other people, and I've definitely had that mindset of, look at these people in this room, like they're not like those other people in, like the people in the ballpark at the baseball game are so different than the people over there. And then I thought, well, the people at Stanford are so different than, because they are from Stanford. And the fact is, it's people. And if you really get to know them, you realize we all go through these struggles. And that's the beautiful experience and there's a saying, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They'll always work if we work for them. And there was a fun guy, he said, sometimes real fucking slow. And that's been and that's been my story. But what I believed, and this is what broke the terminal uniqueness, when someone was sharing, and that's why I feel like a duty in a way to share this, and hopefully whoever listens, that you don't have to believe that it worked, it's going to work for you. You just have to believe that I was that guy, drunk, couldn't stop, blacked out, and my life is different because of these processes. And that kind of, I couldn't argue with that. If seeing people like that man I told you about who had been homeless to going to community college, it was not like a infomercial on TV that was trying to sell me something. Like he did that. And that's where the terminal uniqueness kind of just starts to chip away and go, well, if that person was able to overcome that, maybe I am actually not as bad as I think I am, or like it could work. If somebody who has come, and I have a lot of friends who had been homeless on the streets, living out of a dumpster, and now live amazing lives, it's hard for me to go, well, my problems, I'm so different. And however, a lot of people have to learn through life's teachings. And I respect that spiritual process. Is the best teacher is not a guru. It's not necessarily a therapist. It's life. That's what'll teach you. And
Stephen, thanks so much for our conversation. Always so treasure your open-heartedness and wisdom and willingness to share your experience personally and professionally with the community. I wonder, before we say goodbye, if there's anything you'd say to a family member of someone who's using drugs and alcohol, or a therapist who's working with someone and feeling kind of stuck in the direction of calling bullshit.
I think it's about don't ignore that. Like I regret like ignoring that feeling that I had that something's off here. Like don't ignore that. If you're in the therapist role and you're ignoring that something's not working and not talking about that, that's number one. That, you know, first acknowledging that something's breaking down. The other is just reaching out for help and recognizing I've realized it takes a village. It's not, I don't want that pressure that it's my job to be the be all end all for someone's recovery. And I realized that there's a lot of people that have contributed to getting me to the other side of the shore and continuing on the journey. And if something's not working, it may just be that they need something else or adding pieces. And there's a treatment center, it's called The Last House. So it's a good title. And sometimes as an interventionist, I get calls where it's like, they've tried other things and it's like, okay, what are you going to do, Stephen? And, you know, it's trying to match people to where that's good fits for them. And it's also to not have the shame. Like I've really overcome, like, it's not that there's something deficient in me because someone's not recovering. Like having that kind of pressure is really challenging, but having the courage to call things out, it's very scary at first. I think there's some fear that comes in, but when you see the result of someone's life changing because you were honest with them, and that's the choice of, and I love this, is like, do I want my self-respect or do I want the person to like me? Do I want to say the truth or do I want to keep this client in my practice? And that's a challenge, but it's also, there may need to be some, you know, training. And I feel more of a confidence because I've done it many times and I've also watched it and been around it and kind of been swimming in that, where if you don't feel the confidence to be direct about it, it's not a problem. You just need to have some role play on how to go about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, my friend, for you. I'm already looking forward to sitting down with you again, hopefully sometime soon.
Oh, most definitely. You're one of my heroes.